So you were looking for your next diving watch, and naturally when looking for your next diving watch, you stumble upon the OMEGA Seamaster and the Rolex Submariner. But then you look at the price and think, wow, they're pretty damn expensive. And also the Submariner, you can't even buy it new. So then you think, what is an affordable alternative to the OMEGA Seamaster or the Rolex Submariner? And that's what we're covering today. Welcome back to the Chisholm Hunter channel. My name is Harrison, as always. And before we start this video, if you could do me a huge favor and hit that subscribe button, I would really appreciate it. So the Seamaster was released in 1948, and since then it has become one of the pinnacles in the watch industry when it comes to high quality diving watches. And of course it is featured in the iconic movie James Bond, and that definitely elevated its status within the industry. The Rolex Submariner was released a little bit later in 1954 at Baselworld. Yes, that was a thing back in 1954. And it was the first watch ever to be waterproof to 100 meters. And both of these watches are total icons in the industry, with lots of copycats, with lots of people pulling design aspects out of both watches. So let's kick off with the first affordable alternative. It's important to say here, guys, that I have included a spread when it comes to affordability. I mean, we go down to about £700 and up to about £4,000. I try to include everyone here. The first watch we're going to talk about is the Tag Heuer Aquaracer 200 meters. And I know that there's a 300 meter variant, but for the purposes of this video, let's stick with the 200. The Tag Heuer Aquaracer comes in at £2,600, so it's by no means cheap, but it is a brilliant quality and also affordable alternative to the other watches we talked about. The wearability on this thing is absolutely unbelievable. It comes in at 40 millimeters and 11.54 millimeters thick. It is damn thin for a diving watch, and when it comes to watches on the wrist, the thickness makes up such a huge percentage of what makes the watch look good on your wrist. It just looks brilliant. In terms of aesthetics, this watch does have a teak dial, which gives it tons of depth, and it also has a gradient from the middle of the watch to the outer corners of the watch, or not corners, because it's round. It also has a gradient from the middle of the circle to the outers of the circle, I should say, of kind of a gradient from dark to light or light to dark. And that gives it so much more depth and gives it a lot more of a striking appearance. Your eyes are kind of drawn to the middle of this watch. It also has a date function at the 6 o'clock mark, which is brilliant because, you know me, symmetry. It has a stainless steel unidirectional bezel, and of course it is water resistant to 200 meters. And I love stainless steel bezels. I think that they're just a dying breed in the industry. Everyone's replacing them with ceramic or an aluminium disc insert like in the Tudor Black Bay, and there's something about stainless steel that's that little bit more refined. With that said, it would scratch easier than ceramic. So I get the pros and cons for both, but this is a cracking watch for the money. The movement in this watch is the Caliber 5 automatic movement, and this has 38 hours of power, beats at a frequency of 28,800 VPH. And I feel like since the release of this 200 meters, the Tag ethos has definitely changed. They're definitely honing in more on their movements. They're definitely honing in more on the cost certification like we can see in the new models. And I like that. Next up, we have a watch from Baltic, a brand that I'm starting to get really obsessed with thanks to you guys. This is the Baltic Aquascaphe Classic, and I've picked the white dial because I'm a sucker for white dials. You know me with the one time I film a video about the OMEGA Seamaster, pretty much, I don't have it on. I have the Tudor Black Bay on. Typical. The Baltic Aquascaphe comes in at around about £488 because I'm doing a euro conversion, so this is probably on the cheaper end of what we'll talk about today, but for the price, this watch is aesthetically beautiful. Let's talk about the specs a bit. This watch hits the sweet spot at 39 millimeters in diameter and has a lug to lug of 47 millimeters. It is that little bit thicker than the Aquaracer, coming in at 13 millimeters, but for the money you're paying, those specs are good. It has a water resistance of 200 meters, of course has a unidirectional 120 click bezel coming in black, and the contrast between the black and the white is just awesome. Especially on the white dial variant, when you look at the text coming in orange against the white, against the black, that is just, it's a beautiful color combo, and they've used just enough orange not to overdo it. This watch does have an automatic movement, but it is a mass-produced movement. And I've said in tons of other videos, just because it's mass-produced doesn't mean it's a bad movement. The movement is the Miyota 9039, and that has 42 hours of power. And on that note, what is on your wrist today? I know that I briefly covered that I have the Tudor Black Bay on. Please let me know what is on your wrist today. I love hearing all the weird and wonderful watches that you guys have on. Right, next up in the affordable alternative category is a brand that is so underrated, so underutilized, so underspoken about that I'm trying to promote them as much as I can. And it's not paid promotion, I just love the brand. This is the Certina DS Action Diver coming in at 38mm. And for the money, this watch in stainless steel, or you can get PVD gold, which I wouldn't go for, I'd go for the stainless steel, is just unbelievable. And it has a lot of the same characteristics as a Submariner, pretty much. You do have tons of different dial variations of the Certina DS Action Diver to go for. You have green and blue and black and all the rest of it. Personally, if I take my kind of biases out of it, I think that most people would gravitate towards the blue. This watch, of course, comes in at 38mm. So it is that little bit smaller than the classic diving watches that we see from the Seamaster or from the Submariner, but it still fits. I'd say this is on the cusp of being that little bit too small for a diving watch, but it doesn't quite fit the bill of too small. I think it's pretty good sizing. It still is quite thin, coming in at 12.2mm, and it does have an ETA Powermatic 80 movement inside. Now remember that Swatch Group owns Certina and Tissot, so you'll see some cross-pollination. They also own the ETA, which is the movement, but you'll see some cross-pollination between the movements of those two brands because they're reutilizing those movements, because the Powermatic 80 movement is a powerhouse. This watch is water resistant to 300 meters, not 200 meters, which again, for the money you're paying, which we'll go over in a second, is bloody awesome. It comes in at 316L stainless steel, and that's if you don't get the PVD gold version. It has anti-reflective sapphire crystal glass, which is kind of standard in the industry for this price point. It has a unidirectional bezel because it is a fully functioning dive watch, and it has big, bold hour markers that are kind of angled into shape. So you've got circles and triangles. And honestly, this watch aesthetically looks very, very similar to a Rolex Submariner for 1/1000th of the price. It comes in at £765, but it is a little bit more expensive if you do go for the titanium or the PVD versions. There is this, I'm going off topic, but there's this super, super sexy titanium version with kind of baby blue on the face. You guys should take a look at that because it's awesome. The next watch we have, or the next brand we have even, is making a definite boom in the industry. I definitely like what they're doing. I definitely like the way that they're going. And I also had the CEO on the podcast, Mike Franz, the Into the Mind podcast, and it was awesome to speak to them about what they're doing at Christopher Ward. This is the Christopher Ward C60 Trident Pro. This watch comes in at 40mm and 11.3mm in thickness. It also comes in at 47.45 lug to lug. Now, you do have different color variations to choose between, but personally speaking, and you guys are going to know what I'm going to say before I'm even going to say it, but I do love the white dial on this watch. I mean, the contrast between the white and the black and the stainless steel, and also they've included that touch of orange. They've included that little splash in the second hand and on the dial. It's just a winning, it just looks great. They do include this kind of dark orange rubber strap looking strap with this watch, or you can get the bracelet. Now, I would opt for the bracelet if it was me. Personally, I'm just not a fan of the color of the kind of burnt orange that they've gone for. I think that, or I can understand why they've used it. I mean, it makes sense when you pair that with the second hand and the splash of text, but I just prefer the bracelet. I think the bracelet looks sick. The movement used in this watch is mass-produced. It is the Sellita SW200. This has 38 hours of power, 26 joules, and overall, Sellita movements are actually really good. They're the same as ETA, apart from just a little bit less fancy, I would say. Also, I totally forgot, it comes in at £915, so you're still below that £1,000 mark for a watch that looks a hell of a lot more expensive. Up next, we have another GOAT watch from Tag Heuer. It is a GOAT because the movement and the kind of innovation that have gone into this, and this is part of Tag's new ethos, is just incredible. It has the solargraph movement. This is the Tag Heuer Aquarace Professional 200 meters solargraph. Now, if you look closely at the dial, you'll realize that it's actually kind of semi-translucent. And let me talk about why it's semi-translucent. Basically, what's happened here is solar cells are placed beneath the semi-translucent dial, and they capture the energy from both natural light and also artificial light. So let's say I'm here in the studio and I've got a Tag Heuer solargraph on. It will still be charging even though I'm not outside getting direct sunlight on it. A full charge for the solargraph movement can come with about 40 hours to exposure to light, but that full charge can last the watch 10 months. So you can essentially pick your solargraph movement up, leave it in a safe for a year, bring it back out and charge it up. Or you could leave it for 9 months and take it out. It's pretty awesome. Because of this movement, the 200-meter Aquaracer solargraph comes in a lot thinner than the other variant. It comes in at 9.97 millimeters in thickness and obviously 40 millimeters in diameter. And that thickness is just brilliant. It's just so slim. It's been in a diet and it suits it. Now, a lot of the specs are actually very similar to the previous 200-meter Aquaracer that we spoke about, so I won't bore you with those details, but I do have to say, I'm not a fan of quartz watches. And I know that a lot of people will think, it's not truly a reflection of an alternative because it's not got an automatic movement in it. I don't think not having an automatic movement is a bad thing. Technically, Grand Seiko with their spring drive movements kind of have a hybrid between a battery and an automatic movement. And people don't really complain about that. So I do think that it's not a bad thing having just a different style of movement in your watch. It's just personal preference. And on that note, I've totally forgotten to plug Chisholm Hunter. Chisholm Hunter are official stockists of most of the brands you see here. So if you are looking for your next watch, please consider going to chisholmhunter.co.uk. That is chisholmhunter.co.uk. I had to do it at some point. Sorry. Next on the list, we have the Tudor Black Bay. Yes, we do. The new COSC and METAS certified black dial Black Bay. So Tudor have been kind of on a rampage recently of upgrading absolutely everything, building their own factory, upgrading all their movements, bringing out 58s with the COSC and METAS certified movement, bringing out GMTs, and all that kind of stuff. So everybody at the moment is just infatuated by Tudor, including myself. I mean, I literally have one on, although this is a more vintage Tudor, but you can't deny that a COSC and METAS certified movement for the price that they're offering is very, very good. And by the way, before I forget, the solargraph that we spoke about previously comes in at £2,050. Whereas the Tudor Black Bay that we're about to speak about, because I'll do it or else I'll forget, comes in at £3,910. Now, the Tudor Black Bay 41 is probably one of the closest models you can get to looking like a Submariner without actually being the Submariner. And also Tudor being, beneath technically Rolex as a company, they carry a lot of the same DNA. They carry a lot of the same vibes. I mean, for example, the bezel clicks off of this Tudor Black Bay. Oh, it's Rolex-esque. A lot of Rolex's DNA is in Tudor watches, and that means quality. The Tudor Black Bay 41 comes in at 41 millimeters in diameter, as you might have guessed, and it comes in at 13.6 millimeters in thickness. Now, between those lugs, you have 21 millimeters, and of course, it is water resistant, or waterproof rather, to 200 meters. The movement on this watch is new and upgraded from Tudor, and it is the in-house caliber MT5602-U. This is a self-winding mechanical movement with 70 hours of power. Now, because they've switched from the classic ETA movement, which is in my watch, to the new in-house COSC and METAS variant, it is a little bit thicker to get a Black Bay now than it was when you got my variant, the more vintage variant. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. I don't think it's too thick, but I would like to see it thinner. Now, I am going off topic here, but I do think that what you're going to see from Tudor over the next couple of years at Watches and Wonders is them releasing new products with the COSC and METAS certified movement in it. I think they'll slowly distribute that out to pretty much all their lines until everything has a pretty awesome movement. Up next, we have a Rado Captain Cook. The Rado Captain Cook is truly a underrated line, in my opinion. It's totally awesome. It's a lot more vintage-esque than the previous variants we've talked about. It definitely has its own DNA running through all its lines. It's one of the least similar to the Seamaster and the Submariner, but I've included it because it is just a phenomenal diving watch. There are tons of variations to choose between of the Captain Cook. I'm going to show you guys the bronze variant we filmed just for reference because it's awesome and I love the burgundy against that bronze. But normally these watches come in at 42 millimeters, 12.5 millimeters in thickness, and they're water resistant to 300 meters. They have a fully automatic movement with 80 hours of power, and that's why partially they are that little bit thicker, never mind the kind of domed presence, making it that little bit more vintage. When you combine a Rado Captain Cook with a kind of NATO strap, the vintage vibes just look so cool. Now, normally a Rado Captain Cook will cost you around about £2,500, but you do get a very unique looking dive watch and a very vintage looking dive watch. It's definitely a unique style, but it's a style that I'm definitely warming to. Up next, we have an absolute banger. We have I keep calling Longines a banging brand because they release banging watches every single month, it seems like to me. I mean, they've just released new Longines Legend Diver Heritage editions in new colors, which are banging. They released the new Conquest models, which were banging. They released the Hydra Conquest GMT, which was banging. I mean, everywhere you look, there's upgrades going on that are just phenomenal. And I know what you guys are going to say about the watch I'm about to mention. It's a GMT model. Why have you included it? Hear me out. Hear me out. The Longines Hydra Conquest GMT is honestly the best of everything when it comes to Longines put into the one watch. The refinements and upgrades they've made to the bracelet, to the bezel, to everything from the original Hydra Conquest is unbelievable. And I know that you're getting that extra feature of a GMT hand, which reads multiple time zones, but I think for this one, we can let it slip. The Longines Hydra Conquest GMT comes in various different colors. You have blue, you have black, you have this kind of green color, which I'm not as big a fan of. I would go for the black if it was me. They come in at 41 millimeters in diameter, 49.4 millimeters lug to lug, and 12.9 millimeters in thickness. They have a unidirectional bezel, and they're water resistant to 300 meters. The whole aesthetic of the GMT model, this GMT model, looks a little bit more futuristic, a little bit more aggressive. It's almost like getting a M Sport version of BMW car. Essentially, you've got the same thing, right? You've got the same car, but it just looks sleeker, more aggressive, more aerodynamic, although it'll probably not impact the speed, but it just, you guys get what I mean. It looks bloody awesome. The movement in this watch is the in-house caliber L844, and this is a fully automatic movement, beating at 25,200 VPH with 72 hours of power. I'm honestly so excited to see what Longines do with the Hydra Conquest GMT line. And also, given the kind of upgrades that have come to the GMT, what they're going to do with the Hydra Conquest in general line. I mean, the refinements are just unbelievable. And with that said, thank you guys so much for watching. If you have enjoyed, please consider hitting that subscribe button, or follow our Instagram at Chisholm Hunter Watches, or my Instagram at HB Lifelens, or follow our podcast, the Into the Mind podcast. God, I've been speaking far too long today. I'll see you guys real soon.